Recently, I did another playthrough of one of my all-time favorite games, Pokemon Yellow, and after beating the Elite Four and catching Mewtwo for maybe like the 10th time in my life, I started to wonder just what I could do with the save file stuck on this cartridge. Every other playthrough I've ever done has eventually been destroyed, either from having to start over or from the battery dying. All those hours, all those Pokemon wiped out forever. But this time I knew there was a way to save them, a way to take that save from this cartridge, put it on an emulator like this Amber Neck, and even put it on my modded 3DS where it would be safe from being overwritten or a $2 battery dying in like 10 years. And amazingly, it wasn't even that hard. A little time consuming, sure, but so easy, I went ahead and figured why not do that with every generation. So today, I'm going to show you how to take your saves and move them from cartridge to emulator to modded 3DS and back again. Because hey, maybe you're a little like me and have a hard time deciding if you want to play on an emulator or if you want to play on original hardware and just want to be able to go back and forth when it suits your fancy. Let's get into it. So to start, you're going to need a few things. Something to rip the files from your Game Boy games. I use this GBX card and it's done me no wrong. With this, you can rip not only the game file, so you can legally emulate your game for those who care about such sort of things, but you can also rip the save file as well. And it can even write a save file back to the cartridge, which we're going to use. And it does this for all Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games. Never in my wildest dreams as a kid would I have thought something like this was even possible, which maybe that's why someone else created it, and I just marvel at the fact that it exists. You'll also need a modded 3DS, which can basically do all of that for the DS and 3DS era of games, but we'll start with the Game Boy era. All you have to do is connect your cartridge, plug this into your computer, and fire up the software. Here you'll see all the information to cover the game, and with a simple click of a button, you can rip both the ROM and save to your computer. And if the game has any sort of clock built in, you can edit that as well, so those berries that stopped growing a long time ago can start back up again. To use that save, all you have to do is make sure the save file you ripped from the cartridge is in the same format your emulator uses. You can tell by starting the emulator and creating a save to see what extensions it creates. It likely needs to be the .srm file extension, while the save you just ripped is .sav. Luckily, the only thing you have to do to convert that file is rename the extension. No program to convert the file, just a simple file extension name change, which has to be one of the best things about this whole process. There's just not a lot of extra software needed to make these things work, and they're just so compatible with everything. And now that you've converted that file, all you have to do is point your emulator to it, and there you have your cartridge save on whatever emulator you want to play. Computer, Amberneck, phone, it'll work, and you get the benefit of save states, fast forwarding that original hardware just doesn't afford you. But what if you get that hankering again for just some good old school retro gaming and you want to put this back on the original hardware? All you have to do is take that save from your emulator, convert the save file back to its original, in this case .sav format, and re-upload it to the cartridge. And just like that, all your progress through emulation available once again on original hardware. The kid in me is just so happy. A great thing is you can duplicate any save file. So if you ever decide to go through the time-consuming pain of shiny hunting a starter, you can save that shiny starter for future playthroughs. Is that considered cheating? I don't know. I don't really care. I'm almost 40. I don't have time to sit there soft resetting 8,000 times. I suppose I could just, create one on PKSM, but that's even less fun. And if you have a modded 3DS and want to put that save file on there to play the virtual console games, this is how easy that is. You need to have the game you want to play on the 3DS. In my case, I do have the virtual console game, but you can also emulate. I actually did buy that game before the shop shut down, but I still have this cartridge, so I can put this game wherever I want. If you don't have Gen 1 or 2 on your modded 3DS, there are easy ways to get it. Yeah, like that. So to move the save file over, you first have to fire up the game and create a save file. Spoiler alert, that's going to be a common theme moving forward. Exit the game and navigate to the Homebrew app checkpoint and find the save file you just created. This is the folder where you're going to place the save file you want on the SD card in your 3DS. Shut down the 3DS and hook up the SD card to your computer. Find the save file from the cartridge or your emulator and rename it sav.dat. Transfer that sav.dat file over to the SD card from your 3DS in place of the dummy file you just created. Now you can return to checkpoint on the 3DS and restore from that backup. And now you have the save file that's on your cartridge for use either on an emulator or your 3DS. And you can go back and forth however much you want, just with one little step of altering the file extension. It's not quite cloud synced saves, but not bad for hardware going on 30 plus years. Now, all of that works for Gen 1 and Gen 2, with one little caveat for Gen 2, and maybe some other games that have clock functionality on the Game Boy or Game Boy Color. You see, for virtual console games on the 3DS, the save file has an extra 16 bytes of code tacked on to account for the in-game clock. If you're feeling up to it, you can actually edit the save file manually using a hex editor, or you can have a website do it for you. I'll leave a link to a website down below. Just run your cartridge pooled save through a site like this, and it'll spit out a converted file that's now compatible with the virtual console version of the 3DS. This is only necessary if you're using the injected virtual console versions of the games, not if you opt to emulate your Gen 2 games on 3DS, which is possible, but I just prefer having them loaded up on the home screen, so this is what I do. I just think it looks nice to have all of the Pokemon games in one folder on the 3DS. Oh, and if you want to take this 3DS virtual console file and use it on an emulator or put it back on the cartridge, you'll have to go in and delete that extra line that's been added first. And this thing can also rip the game and save files from Game Boy Advance games, so you can do all of the same things with Gen 3 games or really any Game Boy Advance game you have lying around. All you have to do is rip the save to get it working on an emulator. But to get it on the 3DS, you do have to do a little bit of different work. 3DSs were never meant to play Game Boy Advance games, except for the fact that they were and they could, and a select few early adopters can play a select few games. But you know what, Nintendo? Those of us with modded 3DSs can too, and we can play whatever games we want, so long as we legally own them, of course. Gosh, people get really upset about that kind of stuff. First, move the .sav file over to the SD card, and you can put it in just the root of the card so you can find it easy enough. Go back to your 3DS, and if you haven't ever played it before, start the game so you can create a dummy file. Then exit and turn off the system. Be sure that the game you'll want to mess with is the last thing you open. For some reason, with Game Boy Advance games, the system can only manipulate them if they're the last thing loaded up in memory. I don't understand it. I don't care to. Now, you want to restart your console in God mode, which is done by holding down the start button while powering on. And then navigate to your SD card, which should be the first line, and locate the save file. Press Y to copy this file, and you should see it say clipboard in the upper right corner. Now back out and go down to SysNAND Virtual, click AGB Save, click AGB Save Options, and then select Inject GBA Virtual Console Save, and that's it for Game Boy Advance games. Oh, one thing to mention is when you are ripping the save file for the Game Boy Advance, you want to click No if it asks you about the real-time clock. You don't want to do that, otherwise it might not be compatible with the 3DS because it has its own internal clock going on. Okay, so in order to get that save file off the 3DS to use in either an emulator or restore it to the cartridge, you have to first make sure that the game was, again, the last one loaded up before launching into God mode. Navigate back to the SysNAND Virtual AGB Save.bin, press A on AGB Save Options, and select Dump GBA VC Save. The save file should be dumped to gm9/out on the SD card, where you can take it and use it wherever you like. You just have to remove the .gba vc part of the file extension first, and it'll load up on an emulator. Or you can re-inject it back to the cartridge. And now we can move on to the DS games, which means we no longer need to use this because, well, the DS games don't fit on this, do they? And we can do all of this saving and ripping on our modded 3DS anyway. Just insert your DS cartridge and power up in God mode. This time, navigate down to the cartridge at C:" game card. Press A, and now find your save file, which is the file with the extension .sav. It's like the same extension every time. This is fantastic. Press Y to make a copy, and you should see it say clipboard in the upper right corner. Now back out and go to your SD card where you can paste the save file anywhere. So just use the root like before. Take your SD card back to your computer and move that cartridge save file to where you keep your emulator saves. For the DS, I had to use a dedicated DS emulator because RetroArch just wasn't finding the ROM save for some reason. I used Desmoon, and I guess that's how you pronounce it, and I was able to load up the save right away. No need to alter the extensions or do anything, which means if you want to take that same save and load it back up on the cartridge, you can do that. First, you need to make a backup of the save file on the 3DS. So if you've never done it before in Checkpoint, you insert the cartridge, go to Checkpoint, and make a backup of the save, which is like one of the beautiful things about Checkpoint. It lets you, save any of your DS or 3DS cartridge files. With that out of the way, you need to export the file from the emulator. For some reason, the progress doesn't save to the original file without exporting. I don't know what the deal was with that, but export it as a RAW file and a .sav format. You can name it whatever you want for now because we're going to have to change it in a minute to match the game you're playing, and it's different depending on if you're putting the save back on the cartridge or want to use it in the injected version. For the cartridge, take the SD card and navigate to the 3DS folder. Checkpoint, go to saves, and look for the game you're working on. You should see a folder with a save file in it, and this is what you want your new save file to be named. You can create a new folder under the game folder and name it whatever you want and place your exported emulator save file in there. Now, just put the SD card back in the 3DS, fire up Checkpoint, and go to the game. The new folder you just created should be there so you can restore from the backup in that folder. And there you go, your emulator playthrough of DS games right on the DS card, ready to play on your DS Lite, DSi, or 3DS. If you want to load up the save file to an injected version of the game so you can play DS games on your 3DS without the cartridge, you'll first need to start the injected DS game on your 3DS and create a save file if none exists. There's no need to use Checkpoint for injected DS games because they're just reading the file almost like an emulator does. Now you need to take that save file you want to use and you're going to put it somewhere a little different. Since we're not using Checkpoint here, the file needs to go into the gm9/out/saves folder. And you want the name of the file to match the game exactly, which is why the easiest way to do that is to have a save file that you can just copy the name of. Then move that now renamed save file into the gm9 out saves folder. And when you go to start up your injected DS game, it should load that save. And if you want to ever take that save from your injected version for use somewhere else, all you have to do is take the file and copy it to your emulator or put it into the proper Checkpoint folder for that game so you can restore it to the cartridge. The 3DS games are somewhat similar. Start by inserting the 3DS game you'll want, go to Checkpoint to back up your save, then take that save to your 3DS emulator, if that's what you want to do. I'm using Citra for Mac, and if you haven't played the game, just start the game and create a save so that you have some place to put the file. The nice thing about this emulator is you can right-click on the game and it'll locate the save file just like this. All you have to do is replace the save file with the one on your SD card, which should be located under 3DS, Checkpoint, Save, find the 3DS game, and click on the next folder. And there's your cartridge 3DS game on an emulator, which can not only speed up the game and has fast forward, but also that can display the game in a little extra clarity. I think 4x resolution is just right. It gets rid of the jagged edges and still runs great. I'm sure there's a sweet spot for everyone out there, and this really is one of the benefits something like the Iron Thor or Ambernex RGDS will give over the 3DS, is the ability to display these games with a little more clarity and overall smoothness right out of the box. No need for upscaled texture packages or anything like that. So many 3DS games have assets that just look great, but were unfortunately held back by the low resolution display. These new emulators kind of fix that. I'm not saying they're perfect. I understand the limitations. I still prefer original hardware most of the time, but sometimes seeing them with upscaled resolution just, it is kind of nice. Come on. And it's been a long time since I played Pokemon Sun, so it's kind of cool seeing it again. Like, I had no idea where I was at or what I was doing. Then I fired it up, and there I am on a horse. I don't even remember what the horse's name is, but that's because I'm not really good at remembering all 1,000 of the Pokemon. It's kind of cool seeing it in like high definition. I've never seen Pokemon Sun in such clarity. It kind of makes me want to play it again. There's so many games to play. So when you want to take your emulator save back to the 3DS, all you have to do is take that file, copy it back to the same place on the SD card, go to checkpoint, and restore the save from that file to the cartridge. Once again, no need to alter the file extension or anything like that. And if you want that save on your 3DS injected games, well, you have to start the game and create a save first if you don't have one. Go to checkpoint and back up that save. Then take the save file from your computer, go to 3DS, checkpoint, saves, game folder, and put the save file in the folder that's inside the games folder. It's a little bit different than DS. Now, go to checkpoint on the 3DS and restore the save to the game installed on the system. See, I think the difference here is that the DS games were never meant to be installed in the system like 3DS games were. This is just kind of a workaround you can do for modded 3DSs, so checkpoint doesn't work the same way. And that pretty much covers everything from the Game Boy up through the 3DS. What it comes down to is each generation of consoles has a slightly different process because of how the games are structured, what file systems they use, and how emulators see the games and save files. It's amazing that these days you can take a save file from a decades old cartridge, breeze through it on an emulator, put it back on that cartridge, or even load it up on your 3DS. It's all so seamless and compatible that you can even load up Gen 1 and 2 games from your cartridge to your 3DS and move those Pokemon to home. Nintendo quite obviously never intended any of this to be possible, but that's never stopped the community from doing what it wants to do, and that's the really amazing thing going on here. Thanks to the thousands and thousands of dedicated gamers out there, we really can play these games how we want, when we want, and it looks like it's only going to get better from here. Thanks for watching. I really hope this helps you migrate your saves how you want. I know I made this sort of as a way to do it myself because each generation of console and game has some slight differences that are really hard to remember if you don't do this all the time. So hopefully this can help make it clear for you like it does for me. We'll catch you in the next one.